In this video, I show you how to make resin and wood ocean art that is also a wall-mounted folding desk. So the first step is to make the resin mold. The bottom of my resin mold is particle board. I covered it with packing tape and applied furniture wax. Also, Vaseline is a cheap alternative to furniture wax and works just as well. Next, I placed a leftover 1.5 inch thick piece of cypress on the particle board and used 1x2s to form a 3-sided box around it. I used 1-inch brad nails to secure the 2 sides to the centerpiece. Instead of using the 1.5 inch thick piece of cypress, I decided to resaw it in half on my bandsaw in order to use the other piece for another project. I chose the piece I wanted to use and secured the 1x2s to the sides of the wood. In order to prevent leaking, I sealed the resin mold with silicone caulk on the inside and outside of the mold. To keep the wood from shifting during the resin pours, I used 2 clamps to secure a 2x4 to the top of the cypress. I had 16 ounces in one container and 8 ounces in each of the other ones. I poured cobalt blue pigment powder in the 16-ounce bucket, and somehow I dropped the pigment powder and I thought the genie from Aladdin was about to appear. After cleaning up the mess I made, I poured a lighter blue pigment powder into the second container and white alcohol ink in the third container. I mixed each bucket thoroughly and started pouring. Also, I knew this amount of resin would be about 1/4 of an inch thick and would not be enough resin to reach the top of the wood. Essentially, this layer would be covered up with additional layers. In case you don't know, alcohol is a resin dispersion agent and used quite often to create ocean waves and cool effects such as resin lacing and cells. Alcohol ink can be added directly to resin or pre-mixed with clear resin before pouring. Each option produces a slightly different type of result. In any resin art project, the magic happens when the resin is moved around either with a heat gun or by tilting the resin mold. There is no right or wrong way to do this. I simply move the resin around until I like the look. I'm going for a blue-green color, so I'm going to take the cobalt blue that I have and I'm going to use some green gold, a tad bit of green gold, just to sort of make the blue a little bit greenish as well. I'm not pleased with the way that this turned out, and I was experimenting because I knew this was going to be the first layer, and whatever I did in the second layer was going to cover this, so I wasn't too worried about the appearance. I just sort of experimented with about 4 different colors to see what I liked, and now I know what I want to do. So all of this is going to be covered up. It's not a big deal, it was an experiment. And I'm going to link all the materials that I'm using in the description of the video, as well as on my blog, so be sure to check that out. So with this, I'm not going to put nearly as much, just about like that. This is alcohol ink here, and I'm going to drop some into one of these cups. For the second layer, I repeated the process for the first layer with the same amount of resin. However, I decided to use transparent blue dye near the front to simulate shallow water and to create a bit of depth. The next day, I repeated the same process as the second layer. This was the last layer and I had a good idea of how to achieve the look I was after. I meant to add the alcohol ink directly to the transparent resin instead of mixing it in the clear resin before pouring, but I didn't. Alcohol ink added to transparent blue resin creates a 3D wave effect, sort of similar to the white foam below the surface of the water after a wave crashes. So one thing I completely forgot to do was put tape on the outside boards here. And I'm not sure why I forgot, because that's an important part of releasing the mold, is to cover the outside pieces of wood with packing tape. So I'm going to try to see if I can get lucky by tapping the wood off of the side. I got lucky on this side, but not so much on the front. So I got lucky. This is a very thin piece, so that's probably why I got lucky. There's still a little bit of wood on the end, but I can probably sand this off, so I won't have to cut it. After many sanders and different techniques, I finally found a sander and technique that works best for me. The grit sequence I use is 80, 100, 120, 150, 180, 220, and 320 grit. I have a soft sanding pad I use for 320 grit sandpaper and higher. I outline the technique in detail on my blog, so be sure to check that out. I decided to use a polishing compound to finish this project. This is the first time I used this compound and technique, and I was really happy with the result. The sheen it left behind was perfect, not too glossy, but just enough to bring out the colors in the resin. So they're going to sit on the wall like this, and then they're going to open like so. So it could be used for storage, a desk, to hold all these markers that always fall. I have a stud finder to find studs, but I really don't like to use it. For one, it's cheap. Two, it's not accurate. And three, I don't know where it is. So always just grab a strong magnet. And this is a neodymium magnet, which will find the screws that were used to secure the sheetrock to the studs, which is more accurate anyway. It's more accurate if you have a cheap stud finder. Oh, there's one. All right. So I know that this is a stud. And what's cool about these neodymium magnets is they have a little hole in the middle of them. So just take a screw and you can mark where it is with like a non-intrusive hole. So I don't want to drill into the resin here just because it's a pain. So I'm just going to use these two back slots, and the screws that I am using are not going to protrude through the top. It's about 5/8 of an inch thick, and these screws are like either 3/8 or, yeah, they kind of look like 3/8. One more thing is this is cypress, so the wood is relatively soft. So I'm just going to go in real easy. And then I really like multi-purpose furniture or art pieces like this wall-mounted folded desk. They reduce clutter and just make things way more efficient. I hope you learned some tips and tricks and techniques to make your resin art project a little bit better. If you have any questions or if you need any help, feel free to hit me up in the comment section or on my blog. I'll see you all in the next video.